Critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
I'm not on yet. Hold on. Don't put me on. Okay, let's go. Oh, my. Okay, let's go. Oh, you can move the camera. Move the camera in. Can you move the camera in? No. The zoom in. Look. That's it. That's fine. Yeah. Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, we were supposed to have Ms. Carla Howell. She's the Libertarian Party director. For some reason, we cannot reach her. We haven't been able to connect with her. So if she comes on later on in the program, we'll take her in and we'll just interrupt the program that we have now. We had no program established, but we'll start with something. The other day, I was reading an interesting article from the Future of Freedom Foundation. Now, we have the director, the president of the Future of Freedom Foundation on our show on a regular basis, about every 3 months, Jacob Hornberger. And I subscribe to their online blog, but I also donate, so I get hard copies of many of the articles that are written by libertarian thinkers. And when I say thinkers, I mean people who think. Unfortunately, what we're hearing today in the campaign for president of the United States for the Republican and Democrat Party, so much of it sounds good, some of it doesn't sound so good, but there's no substance behind it. And I think the poster child for the lack of substance in what they're saying is Hillary Clinton. She's perfect. I mean, she says we have to help women out, or my focus will be on those people in needs. I mean, it's all these generalities that mean nothing. I have no idea what she's talking about. And this is a free country. Everyone could do what they want. We're not all waiting for Hillary to do something. All right, I think we have someone coming in the line now. Thank you. Hold on, please.
Hello.
Hello, Carla.
How are you?
We're going to catch you right on the show right now, okay?
Okie doke. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, Carla, you there? Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, there you are. Where have you been? I've been faking it for the past 5 minutes.
I'm sorry. I got it. I thought you were calling me.
Uh-oh. Well, we did try to call you, but no one answered.
Oh, okay.
I hear you knocking, but you can't come in type thing. You know that. Okay, well, we'll start from scratch right now, okay?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. We're happy that you're here, because I had to fake it for an hour now. Okay, our guest today is Carla Howell. She's the Libertarian Party policy director.
Political director. Political director.
That's
okay.
Among her numerous achievements, Carla won over 300,000 votes in her bid for the U.S. Congress in the year 2000 against, get who? Ted Kennedy. Isn't that amazing? I mean, a tremendous accomplishment for a libertarian in the state of Massachusetts. In fact, I ran for Congress in Oklahoma that same year, didn't do nearly as well, so congratulations. By the way, it was the highest percentage of votes for Libertarian Party in a Senate race against a Democrat or a Republican. Yeah. She's been a guest on the Neil Neil Cavuto Show, the O'Reilly Factor, Glenn Beck, Fox News, Happy Hour, and hundreds of TV and radio interviews and debates since 1998. During our live broadcast, we do invite you to call with your questions or comments, 646-652-4620. Remember to press the 1 button so we know that you're just not listening in, that you want to break in and ask a question or make a comment. All right. Carla, welcome to Liberty Talk Radio, and thank you for joining us on our show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. I'm going to ask you an open focus question because I think the quintessential #1 most frustrated libertarian in the entire United States. I've been libertarian for decades, okay? And I've been fighting this thing as you have, What is our strategy for this presidential election? How is it differ from previous years? And are we going to come out with 1.2% of the votes?
Well, what's different about this year is the circumstances that we're in. And there's a couple things going on. First of all, we have Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump as the presumptive nominees of the Democratic and Republican parties, as we all presume, pretty much, most of us. And their unfavorability ratings are the highest, I think, I was hearing, in the better part of a century, since there's been 2 candidates so disliked as these 2 people. From a libertarian perspective, they're very different people, but we expect very similar policies from both of them. Right. That there's much that when you really get at the end of the day, when you look at how's this election going to affect you, whether Hillary or Donald becomes president, your life is not going to substantially change in most cases. However, if the Libertarian is elected, and that is more of a possibility this year than ever before, that changes the game completely. Now, the other thing we have going for us is just the change that's been taking place, and this has been going on for some time, but it's getting more and more intense. And that is not just the disapproval of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, but the general dissatisfaction with big government across the board. Right. And the fact that Americans are lining up with the Libertarian Party in their views. They're becoming, they've seen failed war after failed war and intervention, especially in the Middle East in the last, 13 years. They've seen more and more government regulations doing what? Just wasting money, harassing people, killing jobs. They've seen taxes going up and up. They've seen, the economy just sputters. So all these, bailouts and TARP program and it's just it's not working. And so they're very unhappy about that. They're seeing the value of their dollar diminish, their buying power diminish. If they're a senior with savings, they can't make a return on it. And so their entire financial security is at risk, even if they did a good job of saving all their lives, and much worse if they didn't. So people are really looking for alternatives, and we're seeing polls that show people more willing than ever than voting for a third party. Now, we'll know in November how that actually plays out. But some of the promising signs that we've seen are the media attention that our candidates are getting, and that has been mostly focused on Governor Gary Johnson, who was our nominee in 2012, right. and who has led in almost all of the polls that have been conducted either by the Libertarian Party at our website, which isn't really scientific, or more relevantly by the individual state parties that have had the candidates come and speak and then took straw polls afterwards. So he's gotten a lot of coverage, and other candidates who have gotten significant coverage are John McAfee, right. Austin Peterson. A few others, Darryl Perry, Mark Feldman, and a couple others have gotten some publicity, but we've seen a lot of focus on these leading candidates and on the Libertarian Party in general, where a lot of people are speculating where are people going to go who don't want to vote for Trump or Hillary, and will more and more people come out of the woodwork and vote. Trump has brought people out to vote who didn't vote before. If enough people hear about it, especially if we get into the presidential debates this fall, there are going to be tons of people coming out of the woodwork who never voted or haven't voted in a long time who may vote Libertarian this year. Now, how that, we'll know in November exactly how it's going to play out, but it's really exciting for me because I've never seen anything like this.
Right.
And so I'm very hopeful that we're going to have an extraordinary year and that there's going to be an awakening, and a lot of people are going to learn about the Libertarian alternative.
Well, I hope you're right. The Libertarians don't have primaries in each state.
Only a handful do, yeah.
What if, and I'm playing what if because I'm frustrated beyond frustration. What if the Libertarians had primaries? You think the major networks would pick it up as they pick up the Republican and the Democrat? Why aren't they included in the primaries? Why don't they have primaries the same times that the Republicans and Democrats have the primaries? So we see Republican, Democrat, Libertarian. In other words, we can see the third party there. We never see the Libertarian Party listed anywhere except for on John Stossel. They had John McAfee and Austin Peterson and Gary Johnson. But other than that, they're transparent.
Right. It hasn't been announced yet, so I won't say the date, but there is going to be another station, not a major network station, but another television station will be hosting a live Libertarian debate. So that will be coming up. Yeah, that is a very valid question. Why aren't we being covered? Now, they could say, well, since our primaries we're not included in most of them, and even in the ones where we are, the delegates are not bound to vote for the primary winner. All our delegates are unbound. So you could say it's not immediately as newsworthy as a lot of these primaries are, which do directly impact who's going to be the nominee for the D's and the R's. But nonetheless, it still begs the question, why aren't we being covered?
Yeah, why not?
We are going to be on the ballot, and there's no reason they can't mention us hand in hand when they're talking about all these other Democrats and Republicans, because we are going to be another choice, likely on the ballot in all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia. So absolutely we should be mentioned. Now, you know why we're not. We're qualified. Our candidates are qualified. Right. And we are getting on the ballot. It's because that's the choice that the media is making. They're in bed with the Democrats and Republicans, right. Really close incestuous ties there, who want a duopoly, who want it to be a two-party race. And that's changing somewhat because of the coverage we're seeing, but there's still a fundamental, huge bias in the media, which is contrary to the voters who have said repeatedly, and now a majority, that they want a third choice or alternate choices. So it's wrong what they're doing. They're not serving their readership, their listenership. They're serving their own political agenda, whether it hurts their ratings or not. And their ratings would do great if they included the Libertarians, because it would just blow open the whole debate. It would
absolutely.
It would be fascinating. It would be as fascinating as Trump, only with substance.
Right.
I mean, he's a great entertainer. You got to hand it to him, but his substance is pretty empty, and he talks. He glosses over issues, so you can't really figure out what his policies actually are in most cases. Whereas with Libertarians in the debate, we can be actually talking about issues and how this would dramatically affect people's lives and leave Hillary and Donald looking like just a bunch of arguing whatever. They're not going to change anything. They have shown no interest in fundamentally changing anything. Government's going to stay big and get bigger if either of them is elected.
Yeah. Well, how about this? I have a strategy. You ready for this? You'll probably hang up on me after you hear this. Why don't we find a multi-godzillionaire, all right, and steal his dog? We'll take the dog, from the house. Somehow we'll have to kidnap the dog, their favorite dog, and say, if you don't listen to the libertarian perspective, Fido goes. I mean, I'm joking, obviously, but in other words, get a libertarian, get a ultra rich person to sit down with you guys who know what you're talking about and say, let's talk through these issues. If you're interested in running for office, we can guarantee you that you will capture a good portion of the electorate, only because you'll make sense for the first time in probably 150 years. And for example, if someone would have captured the attention of Donald Trump and sat down with him and gave him an education, which I know would be near impossible for him, but to make him understand the libertarian principles, he may have an aha moment. And then all of a sudden he goes, what have I been thinking? Just like most people who finally have that aha moment and they become rabid, libertarians. I mean, they go to the other extreme. They become, radical. And I'm jabbering, but you see what I mean. And I guess I'm showing my frustration with this whole process of electing people and only hearing Republicans and Democrats and Hillary and both Donald Trump. All they do is talk. I never know what they're saying. Hillary has said absolutely nothing other than, she said she's going to be there for women. She's going to be there for women, I told my wife I would be there for women too, but you would divorce me. She said, you're right, dear. I mean, but it doesn't make any sense. None of it makes sense. So what do you think about this idea? Can we take Fido away from a multi-billionaire,
This has been, people have speculated along these lines and others about how, where's that silver bullet that will get libertarians thrust into the limelight and, more importantly, get the millions of votes that we need to get our candidates in office and actually changing government policy. And among those has been, find a millionaire, try to convince or enlighten somebody. We kind of try all those things all the time and a lot of other things. I think the fundamental problem, and we should just keep trying everything and attack on all fronts, politically and apolitically, all these things help. I think the most critical element is that we keep running candidates and that people vote for them. Because the more people who actually vote for libertarian candidates, the more relevant we become in the elections. First of all, because they start accusing us of, quote, spoiling the election. And that's a good sign, because of course, right. They're wrong. They're the ones who were spoiling the elections. We're the ones who are saving democracy. Right. But that aside, it's good because it puts focus on our candidates, and people start to hear, what are they running for? What are they going to do if they're elected? How will that affect me? And that's the important thing that people need to hear. So plus, whenever people vote libertarian, it varies state to state what the requirements are, but the more who vote libertarian, the more ballot access we retain, and the more effective we become. Because we have to fight to get on the ballot in 50 states, and in a lot of our states, even though we get the president on the ballot, we may struggle and not always succeed to get our down-ticket candidates on the ballot. So we need those votes, and we need also just the statement it makes, because what it means when someone votes libertarian is they're saying, I do not give you permission, Democrat or Republican, to engage in more wars, to tax us more, to spend more, to increase government debt, to hand out favors to your corporate cronies and union cronies. I do not give you permission. I reject that. And I demand small government. I demand the opposite of that. That's what you're saying when you vote libertarian. When you vote Democrat or Republican, especially if you think you're voting for the lesser of two evils, all you're doing is reinforcing that bad message and saying, give me more of what's been killing us for the last century, and
absolutely.
Give me another 4 years of it. And you don't want to send that message. You don't want to, it's not just a message, you're actually giving them permission. You're giving them license to tax more, to spend more, to engage in more wars. And that's why it's very, very destructive and damaging to vote for these big government Democrat and Republican politicians. Voting libertarian is what changes that. And telling your friend, and talking about your friends, convincing your friends and your family members and your neighbors and everybody you know, take the step, give it up. What you've been doing doesn't work. It's just sending this country, just selling us down the river. Vote libertarian, that's how we change it. And it's a long, hard slog that a lot of us have been working on for a long time. We need to keep doing that. We need to keep running candidates. We need to support candidates. If you have a candidate in your district, and hopefully everyone will have our presidential and vice presidential candidates in their district, that's our aim and likely to happen. talk about it, vote for them, get people really considering these alternatives. And that's the only way we're going to do it, because we don't have the resources. I mean, the deck has been stacked against us for a long time. That's the only reason libertarians aren't in control today, because it is the natural choice for people who just want freedom, who believe in the golden rule, don't hurt anyone, treat others and their property with respect. I mean, this is fundamental libertarianism. And so we need to just really, person by person, day by day, in every way we can, support these efforts to advance liberty. The most powerful way to do it is by supporting the Libertarian Party, our candidates, and voting for our candidates.
Yeah, I may throw myself back into commercial radio again. I did that for a while. I used to follow Glenn Beck on Saturday night on KFAQ, and I had a great following. It wasn't me, but it was the message, because even to this day, and this was a couple of years ago that I quit, people would come up to me and say, and people I don't even know. They'd say, and they'd see my shirt that says Liberty Talk, where is it? Liberty Talk Radio, everything's backwards. Liberty Talk Radio. They say, I miss your program. I have no idea who these people are. And they said, you really made me think, your message was so different. And I really felt like I was on a mission and I was accomplishing something. And I just gave up after a while because of the frustrations of dealing with a neocon station, I guess. But there's a chance I may go back, because I really made a connection with so many of the viewers, the listeners, and I'd like to do that again. I think people would call and say things like, but, you say, if there's not a libertarian to vote for, don't vote. I said, yes. They said, well, you have to vote. I said, where does it say that? They said the Constitution. I said, no. In our Declaration of Independence, it says you have the duty to dissent, not to vote. You have to dissent. You have to be a dissident, not a voter. And people are under this impression. And the school systems today have done us a great disservice, because they won't even touch the Constitution. Most teachers have never even been taught anything about the Constitution, because they're products of the school system, and they're carrying this forward. And it's just getting worse. So I don't know. The whole system is against that. They're more for the established parties. And unless we get some really rich guy in there who says, I want to blow $3 or $4 billion. How about we go to Shark Tank and get Kevin O'Leary or someone like that, or Mark Cuban, to run, where they have billions of dollars, and they don't care if they throw $1 or $2 billion to a campaign, and educate them to be libertarians. What do you think of that?
It's funny, some of us were just talking about Mark Cuban the other night, that, he's definitely got some libertarian leanings. I would want him to learn more about our agenda, and I don't know the other fellow's agenda to comment on that, but it may happen one of these days. The more people vote, the more we're on the ballot, the more candidates we have, the more publicity we get, the more these kinds of people become interested. And we've had interest from a number of people with money and former prominent Democrat and Republican politicians who came knocking on our door this year considering running for president. So, and this has happened before, but we saw more of it this year. And just as we get bigger, more people are going to do that. Now, trying to convince someone to do that, well, if someone thinks they have a shot at it, go for it. But usually doesn't pan out. Most people with money, even if they claim to have libertarian leanings, they can be disappointing. I'd rather find somebody whose heart's in it, who's committed to actually shrinking government. There's an important distinction that I try to make when I watch people in politics, and especially libertarians or people who claim to be libertarian, and that is, it's one thing to talk about libertarian principles, and there's a lot of people who can do that, and many who can do it very well. But it's another thing to act consistent with that. And what that means is we need to be proposing specific reductions in government in order to achieve liberty. There's people who say, oh, the Department of Education should go, and this department should go, and it's wrong, and it's immoral, and Ayn Rand, and Mises, and Rothbard, and principle. And then they never get around to saying, well, why don't we actually get rid of all this big government that we shouldn't have? So we have freedom. So we have a free market. So we have civil liberties. So we have peace. People don't make that connection, a lot of them. So a lot of the people who, and it's sort of a habit, it's an inbred habit with everybody in politics, and even a lot of libertarians, with plenty of exceptions, the biggest exceptions being Libertarian Party candidates and their supporters. But these other so-called libertarians, they'll talk about what's wrong with government. They'll talk about principles, how they disagree, how the Constitution's important, but what are you going to do about it? We need to get serious about talking about war on drugs is a failure. End it. High taxes deplete people of their wealth and gives it to big government politicians who waste it and squander it and actually make a lot of things worse than they were before. Things that can be much better served by the private sector. So stop it. End the income tax, end the federal income tax, end the corporate tax, eventually privatize Social Security, but don't rip it out from the people who are dependent on it. They were forced to pay into it. But how about government pensions? Let's go after these obscene government pensions and leave Social Security alone. Let's free health care. Let's try a real free market in health care. There's no one alive who's ever experienced health freedom because it's been so regulated for the last decade.
Right.
Let's talk about what it's like if you actually have a free market rather than a government certifying drugs, so that drugs can come to market faster and cheaper, and people who are dying can get their hands on life-saving drugs or experimental drugs. Why shouldn't they? The FDA says, no, no, no. That's wrong. End it. Take away their regulatory powers. Get rid of all these state licensing laws, or relax these state licensing laws so a lot more people can enter professions. This is going to take care of a lot of our unemployment problem.
Right.
There's a lot of people with skills who can't get a foot in the door because they have to fill out government permit and form ABCD and pay fee ABCD, and then they have to worry about this regulation and that regulation and these reports and blah, 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 and they get drowned in big government regulation and bureaucracy, and they can't start a business or they can't expand a business, and this not only hurts their business, but who suffers the most? People who need jobs.
Right.
Yeah, so we need to actually get talking about these solutions and not just the theory of libertarianism, but we need people who are really committed and brave enough, and I've been doing this a long time, so it's nothing to me, but people need to practice doing this and speaking this way so it becomes normal, because it is normal. What's very abnormal is a federal government that spends $4 trillion every year and is approaching $20 trillion in debt. That's insane. That is beyond insane. And what we're talking about is balancing the budget, getting rid of taxes we don't need, downsizing big government so it's lean and is focused only on protecting our lives, liberty, and property, and getting rid of all the rest, moving all that money into the productive private sector where it will be invested and where it will create jobs, where people will be free to live their lives as long as they're not harming anyone else. We need action. We need change. We don't just need libertarians elected. We need libertarians elected because they will go to office and do these things. Downsize big government and make us free.
You know, my wife's an audiologist, and she does a lot of preoperative, testing and whatever. And if someone came to her and needed this testing done, and they said, "I'm sorry, I'm broke. How about but I raise chickens. I'll give you a dozen eggs every week or month, for a year." She'd say yes. Whatever. Yes, the answer is yes. But if the government would find out, she'd wind up in jail. It's such a convoluted system. You want to help somebody else out, and you wind up being in trouble. And you can't do well, because if you do right by other people, there's a government bureaucracy that will hold your feet to the fire to comply with some stupid rule and regulation that has nothing to do with health care. I have friends that are doctors, and I ask these questions all the time. I said, well, what if someone came in and let's assume a free market system, you didn't have all this garbage to go through, and someone came to you and said, they needed some help. Would you help them? And if they couldn't pay, they said, absolutely. I've never heard them say, well, maybe, it depends on the cost. They say, absolutely, every one of them. But under today's system, I'll give you an example. I was referred because I ripped a muscle in my back somehow. I can't figure out how I did it. But anyway, I was referred from the neurologist that I went to because I thought it was a back problem, who ran all these tests, just to get a cortisone shot. All right. So the doctor referred me, and I figured I just have to go there, show my identification. They give me a shot. I left. I had to fill out 14 pieces of paper, 14 documents to get that cortisone shot. And I didn't come off the street. I was referred by a neurologist, a surgeon, a high-level surgeon, said to give this guy a shot, and I still had to fill out 14 sheets. I was so disgusted I didn't want the shot after that. I took it and left and said, never again. People don't realize that the system is so clogged, and it's all because of government regulations and the likes of Donald Trump and, of course, Hillary Clinton to the nth degree are going to make it worse. Donald Trump says he's gonna do away with Obamacare, and he's gonna have his own. We're gonna have Trump care, whatever that's gonna be, and that may even be worse. And yet, no one's questioning him on that.
Yeah. Yep. Unless we get libertarians in the debate, I didn't see that particular comment from. Did he actually call it Trump Care? Oh
no, he didn't. I call it Trump Care. He said he will have. There will be universal health care. Health care will be available to everyone. How? He doesn't explain why. As you said, he talks in platitudes and generalities, but nothing specific. He says we'll figure it out when we get there. Well, what he's talking about is universal health care. He's saying the same thing Hillary Clinton is saying, but he's disagreeing with her. It drives me nuts listening to these people, which I don't listen to them very often, but every once in a while I do, and that sets me off for a while.
Right. I mean, I'm sorry you're so frustrated.
You don't know. I mean, I'm being calm right now, you know?
Well, the frustrating thing, I mean, listening to these people talk, I mean, you and I have been doing this for decades. It's nothing new. The discouraging part is seeing people who still buy into it, especially all the people who know it's wrong, but they buy into voting for it anyway. And that's the problem. There's the other big problem, even bigger problem, is the majority of voters in this country are eligible voters who don't, who are more libertarian than anything else, and they say it doesn't matter. Well, there's 150 million people saying it doesn't matter. If those 150 million people voted, we would take government back.
Right.
We would take government back.
Absolutely.
And, you could say, I mean, one of these people who votes religiously for big government, a government union person voting for Democrats or a corporate cronyist voting for a Republican, they could say the same thing. Their vote doesn't matter. Well, in all likelihood, one vote in any given election isn't going to throw it, but cumulatively they all do. But they all are organized, and they get their people to the polls, and they vote, and we don't. We need to get to the polls and vote so we win.
Right. Carla, could we break for about 60 seconds? I want to continue this conversation. Can you stay with us for a while?
Of course.
Okay, I appreciate that. Folks, don't go away. We have Carla Howell with us today. She's the political director for the Libertarian Party, and we're going to solve all these problems today for the Libertarian Party and get them on the right track. Okay, hold on. We're going to be gone for 60 seconds, give an opportunity for our sponsors just to say hello, but we'll be right back. Don't go away. Thank you.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective, not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com.
Ranch Acres Audiology is about caring, about getting the most out of life, about personal attention.
Sometimes helping someone with their hearing is really helping them with more than just hearing. That's the goal of my practice. That's what my goal has been for 20 years.
You're invited to attend our next free Lunch and Learn seminar. Call us today, 918-749-7711.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
Folks, this is Joe Cristiano with the Liberty Talk Radio. We have with us today Carla Howell. She's the Libertarian Party political director, and we're talking about this election that we're going through and how the Libertarian Party can maybe gain some traction. Carla, thank you very much for staying with us during the break. Carla, at one time there was a I recall there used to be, was it Blue Dog Democrats? They were libertarians, basically. Do I have that right, or Red Dog or Blue Dog Democrats?
Blue Dog, I don't know if I would call them libertarians. I would call them fiscally conservative Democrats. I'm not the best person to ask the definition of a Blue Dog Democrat, but I didn't get the impression they were libertarians exactly. But
okay.
They leaned that way,
Yeah.
shall we say.
Well, we had the likes of a Ron Paul, who was a libertarian, pure libertarian, and he ran for office. I am absolutely convinced that the election when he ran was rigged, because I remember in one state, and I don't recall which one it was, he had a rally and thousands of people showed up, and I think Romney also had a rally that day and only a few hundred people showed up. And when they tallied out the tickets, Romney got the thousands of votes, and Ron Paul only got the hundreds, and that really, just smells 16 ways from Sunday. But do you think we would be better off as a party to be either Republican or Democrat or both, and have a Republican, Libertarian Republican, and a Libertarian Democrat in the mainstream, similar to what Ron Paul? And call yourself, like they have conservative Republicans, liberal Republicans, all sorts of, qualifications. What about a Libertarian Republican and a Libertarian Democrat?
Well, there's been people who've been trying that for a long time. A good number of people in the Libertarian Party, and quite a few of our candidates are former Republicans, some Democrats, and they have tried. They have tried to work within the Democratic and Republican parties, and what they say is that it's hopeless, because the people who control those parties are fundamentally big government, and they are hostile to people who try to run as Republicans or Democrats on small government libertarian policies. And in fact, what Ron Paul, when he was running, he was one of the few who got in. He's about the only truly libertarian Republican to be elected to the Congress or Senate, and they primaried him. They would run another Republican against him, but after he was so well established in his district, he was able to fend off those challenges. Most people aren't, especially if they're newcomers. They cannot win their primary. And when they run as a Libertarian, at least they're in the general election. So people are trying that, and power to the ones, there's still some trying here and there, but many of them are pretty discouraged that they just can't get anywhere in that party, either because they're not welcome, they can't get anyone to change anything, they're expected to fall in line and endorse a bunch of big government colleagues. And the problem with that is, and Rand Paul bought into that, right? He has said very openly that that's how he won his Senate seat, was by agreeing to endorse Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell and all these awful big government Republicans.
Horrible people. Horrible.
And the problem with that is in a lot of cases, I think the jury's out for Rand Paul, whether he in the end will do more good with his libertarian advocacy in the Senate than the damage he has done by endorsing Romney, endorsing McConnell. He has also allowed his voice to be used in phone blasts against our libertarian candidates in U.S. Senate and congressional races. And this is the absolute worst thing you can do, because what he's doing is he's buying into their agenda of eliminating the competition. They want two parties that are both big government, and they don't want anyone challenging that. Well, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to bust open this two-party duopoly. We need to get people to see they do have options. It is possible to change it. They're on the ballot, and vote for them. And by the way, when a Libertarian is not in a particular race on the ballot, write in a Libertarian. You can, not in every state, in most states, you can write in a candidate. Do vote, do go to the polls, write in a Libertarian, because the more we say election after election, we're here and we're only voting for less government. We are not buying into the choices that you're saying that we have to buy into. We're not. We refuse. And that is what's going to change things in this country.
Yeah. You know, when Rand Paul endorsed Romney and the others, he corrupted the thought process of people who thought they understood what libertarianism was, and it confused people. I think he did more harm than he ever imagined he could do, because he's a libertarian and he's endorsing Romney, so what is a libertarian? And then we had to start this education over again, saying, well, that's not really, you know, and then it gets too muddy. You can't get out of that. It was a maze that you just couldn't get out of. And it's just like that. It just really bothered me.
And the thing is, you know, people say, oh, it was just an endorsement. Really? Then why didn't he just refuse to do it?
That's right, yeah.
Because they wouldn't have let him in? Well, why do you think they thought it was so important that they weren't going to let him into the Senate unless he did it, if it really didn't matter? Obviously, it does matter. Yeah. And they know it does. It keeps their game in place. It keeps big government big. And that's exactly why it's critically important. I say to people, you want to run as a Republican? Of course, I try to convince them to run as a Libertarian. But if they refuse, they say, I'm going to go the Republican. I say, okay, will you promise not to ever endorse a big government Republican? And they go, and some will say yes, and some will, you know, think about it or say no. And then I say, then why are you even doing this? Yeah. Yeah. Why? You're obviously doing it because you're interested in your own career, not liberty.
Right. Right. You know, I love to watch the House of Commons in Britain, you know, when they have their open sessions, and here they have their president, so to speak, the prime minister, and he'll get up and, you know, say something, and then everyone else will stand up that wants to respond, and they'll boo him sometimes and whatever. And there's a certain amount of disrespect that I like about that. I mean, not that I like being disrespectful, but at least people give it an opportunity to voice their opinion. When our president gets up in front of the Senate and says something, even if everyone disagreed 100%, no one says a word. It's almost as if everything that's being said is gospel, everyone's on the same page, and it's not the case. And it seems that things have changed so much where the country that we fought a revolution, we fought to break from, is now has a freer process than we have. We've become enslaved, and they've become more free. Am I overstating that?
No, I don't think you are. In fact, you know about these analyses they do once every year or two, the Wall Street Journal, the Fraser Institute in Canada, some others. They do this evaluation of all the countries in the world, and they rate them on their economic freedom.
Oh yeah, right. We're down there.
And the UK is now ahead of us.
Yeah.
We were number 4 in the year. 10 or 15 years ago, we were number 4 in the world after Hong Kong, New Zealand, and Singapore.
Right.
Now we're 15.
Yeah, right.
And the UK is in the 10, 12, somewhere ahead of us.
Yeah.
So it's not just perception. It's not just the arguing that they put on in the parliament. It's also actually how their country is run. And this is a country with socialized medicine, which is horrible, but it's still more free than the United States because we cumulatively have so much government. It is absolutely killing people, literally killing people.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought.
It never happens.
This is what happens when you get so old. You know, your brain rots. You know, I guess. But at least in some European countries, if there is a Libertarian Party, for example, and 5% of the people are registered libertarians, they have a 5% representation. But here, it's an all or nothing.
Yeah.
So
Now-
people give up, and I don't like
Yeah,
that
now,
at
it
all.
would be nice if we had a multi-party system like theirs, where we did have representation. Unfortunately, though, I've noticed that, yeah, maybe that's why things are improving a little there, maybe, or maybe not. But they still have very big government in all these European
right.
countries. So
Right.
it's not a silver bullet. It's not going
I
to cure
agree.
things. It's what's more important is that we get people voting, whether we have a dominant two parties or not. We've got to get people voting Libertarian, and specifically voting for people who will shrink government and advance liberty. This is where the rubber meets the road. The rest is a bunch of talk. Until we vote for the people who will go in and dismantle and downsize DC and their state governments and their local governments, go in there and sponsor and co-sponsor bills and work to get them passed, not these fake bills that they know won't pass and make deals and make sure they don't pass. I'm talking about be there, committed to actually getting rid of the Department of Education, actually ending the war on drugs, actually ending the income tax, replacing it with nothing, getting rid of the IRS. Really, we can do that. That's possible.
Right.
And the more we talk about it and the more we vote for it, the more possible it becomes. So let's get these people voted for, support them. And it's critically important that people do this. So if you're hearing this and you are wondering if there's libertarians that are going to be on your ballot, call your state Libertarian Party or go to their website. And a lot of them have their candidates posted by now. Some of them don't yet because they haven't been nominated yet. But find out who they are. Find out if they need your help getting signatures to get on the ballot. Make a donation to them. Talk about them to your friends. Share them in social media. Do what you can to spread the word,
Right.
because it's these one-on-one interactions that ultimately really change people and change their behavior. And that's what we have to do, is change how people behave, especially on November, what is it? Is it the 8th this year? November 8th, who they cast their vote for.
Yeah, it's one other point about the UK debates is that Cameron, of course, the reigning Prime Minister, his position on stage was all the way to the on one side. He had the Ron Paul slot basically, and the third party or small fractional party candidates had center stage, the exact opposite of what we do here. And I actually enjoyed listening to it because the questions were not asked by the moderators. The questions were asked by the candidates themselves. A candidate would add Cameron a question and say, how would you justify this? How did you justify doing this? And there would be a direct question, and it wouldn't be filtered. And Nigel Farage was one of them. And although he is probably more of a public figure than most, he was towards the end. And the relatively unknown parties had center stage. And I said, it just shows you how corrupt our system is, where you have, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump center stage. No kidding, And then we say we're the free country. We're not. But then.
Well, that's interesting. And I think that is, one thing I've experienced, as I'm sure you have, but as a candidate and a spokesperson for ballot initiatives, what you see all the time is how much the media controls the narrative, as they say. And in particular, if you're a candidate and there's a 2-minute spot on your campaign in the news, maybe there'll be 2 10-second sound bites of the candidate speaking, and the other 60 seconds, 90 seconds, whatever it is, will be them talking and them showing footage and them framing the whole discussion about your candidacy rather than what you have to say as the candidate who formed a campaign, who assembled lots of volunteers, who got a bunch of literature, got on the ballot. The candidate should be the one who's talking, not the media's interpretation of what the candidate's saying and the media's questions, which try to box you into their silly little issues and issues du jour, rather than why you are running, which in many cases is far more interesting, not to mention relevant, to the everyday voter.
Yeah. Do you think, Carla, that the average American voter, and I hate saying this because it sounds so elitist, and I know that, so I'm going to get hate mail, that I can't handle, but But you think the average American person has been dumbed down to such a point where thinking through the process is almost beyond the average American person today? That they're just looking for the sound bite, they can handle the sound bite, but critical thinking is something that actually hurts the brain or something?
Well, I think most people are perfectly capable. It's not an issue of intelligence, certainly. It's an issue of priorities, of time, and the fact that the media, in cahoots with incumbent politicians, is controlling politics. I mean, the most obvious example of this is the Commission on Presidential Debates. The Commission on Presidential Debates is a private organization of Democrats and Republicans who control the debates, who've made deals with the candidates, or that each party requires their candidates to, go along with their rules. And the rules say that this committee of Democrats and Republicans is going to select who's going to be in the presidential debates. And you may not do any other debates other than the ones that we specify. Right. And we're going to set rules that make it impossible for no one else to get in. The rules they have now is that you have to have 15% of the vote in polls that we select. And of course, they and all their pals usually keep the Libertarians out of the polls. And when you're not in the polls, which they report on all the time, people get the impression you're not in the race.
That's right. Yeah.
So then no one knows who you are. So they've created this very incestuous insider game. And the media is very much a part of this because they're playing along with this and saying, we'll sponsor these debates and we'll go along with your format and your rules. And instead of just actually covering the candidates. And, so the media, to be responsible, they need to, first of all, just be covering Governor Gary Johnson, John McAfee, Austin Peterson, Darryl Perry, Mark Feldman, and others should be talked about all the time.
Right.
One of those candidates is going to be on the ballot in all likelihood in every state in this country and be qualified and be capable of winning the presidential election if people hear about them. Yeah. They should be covering them. Now we're seeing more. We're seeing a lot more than we ever have before, but we're not yet a household name. And we need to be a household name. And that's what they stand in the way of. I've dealt with the media a lot. They've got a big government agenda. Yeah. They have a big government agenda. And it's clear from their behavior that they have systematically, routinely ignored libertarians from ever getting in positions of significant power. Now, the media consists of people, they're all different, and it is changing, it is evolving, and they're having to respond to the fact that the approval ratings of the Democrats and Republicans are in the toilet, and the desire for a third choice is at all-time highs. So to some degree, they have to respond to that, and they are responding to it somewhat. But they've got a long way to go, and the fact that when you talk to them about something like, let's get rid of the income tax, that should even be something unusual. It should be something people talk about all the time. They should be saying, why am I giving a big chunk of my pay to the government with every paycheck when these people are horrible, the things that they're doing? They're making things worse. They're wasting tons of money. They're in getting involved in endless wars. They're sending regulators down who are on my back constantly. They want to audit me. Why are we doing this? Why are we paying an income tax? We don't need an income tax. And if we end the income tax, what would happen? And these numbers aren't even up to date. But when we calculated it 2 years ago, we end the federal income tax, $11,525 on average back to every American taxpayer. $11,525 every year.
Wow.
Every year. Imagine what people can do with that money to, buy a new car, replace the old jalopy, put it away for their retirement, get that new furnace that they need, fix their drafty windows. I mean, pay off their school loans, pay off their credit card debt, take their family on a vacation that they've been promising for years that they haven't been able to do. When you put that money back in the private sector, it gets spent just like government spends it. So you get all the stimulation that you get from any spending, but you get much more because it's being spent on what people really want, what is really demanded in the marketplace, and what will create sustainable jobs. You know, when the government spends money, that's because they took it from you, and they have to keep taking it from you to keep those jobs alive. They're not going to sustain themselves. In the private sector, they sustain themselves, and there's no force involved. No one has to pay a tax. It just happens, because that's what happens to money in the free market in circulation. So there's every reason in the world to end the federal income tax and the corporate tax and the estate tax and eventually privatize Social Security, just as one example of the things that should be normal and should be talked about all the time. Now, we got it talked about in Massachusetts. I ran a couple of ballot initiatives up there, as you know, to end taxes, and one was to end this, two of them were to end the state income tax in Massachusetts. It's real interesting, because when we first introduced our first initiative, it was, people went, what? No one ever talks about ending a tax. Really? And it was just sort of, people were just sort of perplexed by it at first. But when we ran it and then did another initiative, and then we did a third initiative to cut the sales tax, it starts to become more and more normal. And then people start to go, yeah, I want that. And the only reason it didn't pass is because, and we were leading in the polls in the last one, was because the teachers union spent millions of dollars that we didn't have to run blanket advertising, I mean saturation advertising, to convince people that the schools and roads and police and fire would all evaporate like something in a Star Trek movie if we didn't keep paying them all this money, which is completely inaccurate. But nonetheless, they got away with it because they had the money to convince people. And of course, because so many people who wanted that didn't show up and vote, and they got all their people out to vote. You know, the people in these government unions, they vote, and so they won. But a majority of people in that state, there is no question in my mind that a majority of people in that state definitely would have preferred to end the income tax, have that money back in their own family budget, get rid of all this extra government. Now, this should be a normal, everyday conversation, but it is being systematically suppressed and censored by the mainstream media, and that's why voting for libertarians is so important. It turns that around. It gives those things that should be normal and talked about all the time a very critical voice, and that's what your vote does.
You know, we're almost out of time, but I have to ask you one off-the-wall question. I'm a amateur economist, okay? And that's what I spend most of my time doing, and that's why I have so many economists on my program talking about the economic conditions, what's really going on and whatever, and I sort of enjoy that. And also I try to profit by it because I want to know what really is going on, and I don't want folly-la. But in the event, and many of them who are the noted economists, some of the highest ranked communists in the world who have been on my program, talk about the likelihood of a economic crash much worse than the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, because all we did with the patient there that was critically ill and dying, we just filled with morphine and they felt great for a few years, and now the patient is even worse and the morphine isn't working. So I mean, that's obviously just a metaphor, but that's what we did. Now, what happens when this patient finally dies and we have a severe economic crash, not just a paper crash in a way, because then just printing plenty of money and just putting everything whole again. If there's really one worse than 2008, 2009, do you think that will affect the election at all?
If there's one between now and November?
Yes.
It could happen. Certainly it would. I think it would. How it would affect it, I don't know. It's amazing that despite the prolonged unemployment and underemployment, the economic malaise, the fact that so many senior citizens can't get a return on their investment. I mean, there's so many people in dire circumstances, if not in crisis in this country, yet they continue to get away with. Now, I think Trump's election and Bernie Sanders' success within the Democratic nomination has been a reflection of people's frustration to a large degree. And because they didn't, these were the guys on TV, they weren't hearing the libertarians, so they said, well, that's something different. And they were saying, I want that something different. And this is why the Republicans in particular have somewhat lost control of their party, that this guy Trump they don't want looks likely to get the nomination. So I think we're seeing the effects already of that without even getting to a crash. And if there was a crash, the problem with crises is you got to be all the more vigilant and careful, because this is when the government likes to come in, like the recession in the 30s, and enact all these FDR programs. Their solution is always government, 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 government. And that's another reason to vote Libertarian, because we need to inoculate people. We need people to really get jiggy with the fact that government is not the solution. Government is the problem.
Right.
Government is the problem.
Right.
And voting Libertarian is the solution. So it's always a risk. The crash could happen any day, or it may not be a sudden crash. It could be just continued economic malaise and degradation of our wealth and hard times, a lot of hard times for people, and it's sad. So I'm no economist, and even if I was, I think I would know better than to predict when and what anything particular is going to happen. But it's certainly a real possibility.
Yeah, would be interesting. Carla, we're about out of time. I'll give you the last 30 seconds or so to wrap things up and to tell people what they may do and how they may contact the Libertarian Party.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. You're a delightful host.
Thank you.
And I invite people to go to lp.org, the Libertarian Party website, lp.org. And from there you can link to your state website. You can get involved with your state party. You can join the party. It's $25 a year, 7 cents a day. You can come to our national convention this May in Orlando, Florida, Memorial Day weekend. It's going to be an amazing, amazing event, and we will be selecting our presidential candidate at that convention. And above all, vote Libertarian, because that is how we're going to change things.
Carla, thank you so much for being our guest. I do hope you will accept our invitation to return at a later date and give us an update.
Would love to. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well, stay tuned.